Hello there. My name is Emily. I'm a PhD student studying computer science with an interest in making tools that help people make games using machine learning. I'm heading into the third year of my program, and I'd like to think that there's nothing else I'd rather be doing with my life. I hope that one day I can work in academia, ideally as a professor who teaches people how to make games. However, this is not a video about computer science. This is a video about RuneScape. RuneScape is a beautiful, evil game that I can wholeheartedly recommend to nobody. It's given me some of the highest highs that I've had playing games as a hobby, and it exemplifies some of the hardest struggles in my life. This is the story of my journey to achieving Blood Torva, one of the most difficult accomplishments in RuneScape, the game that ruined my life. But first, some background. I started playing RuneScape about a year and a half ago, when my girlfriend introduced me to the game. She's been playing since she was a kid, and I had always been around the game growing up, but I couldn't get off Tutorial Island as a child. When I started playing, I was enamored by the world of the game, and all the different skills, like fishing. We started off as a free-to-play duo group Iron Man, which is a game mode in which you can only freely trade with your duo partner. After quickly sinking our teeth into all the free-to-play content that OSRS has to offer, we defeated Elvarg and wanted more, and I was convinced to buy membership to continue playing. I was in love with the game at this point, quickly sinking the majority of my non-working time into playing. Over the next couple of months, we made substantial progress as Irons, eventually culminating in the completion of Song of the Elves. It was there, in the elven city of Prifddinas, that I got my first taste of real PvM, the Corrupted Gauntlet. To understand PvM, or player versus monster in RuneScape, I'm going to quickly outline the game's mechanics. This is going to go pretty fast because I want to get the background out of the way quickly so we can talk about how cool some of these encounters are. The first and most important thing to understand is that RuneScape operates on a tick system, with ticks occurring every 0.6 seconds. Every action in the game, whether it's made by an NPC or the player, syncs to this tick system. You can think of this like a 100 BPM metronome that marches along, controlling all the actions in the game as it goes. When you click towards a position to move, you begin moving to that position on the next available tick. When you click to attack a monster, your attack goes off on the next available tick, and the cooldowns of your attacks are also measured in ticks. Next, let's talk about movement. RuneScape is a tile-based game, and your character occupies a 1x1 tile on the game world's grid. You can walk a single tile in a tick, or you can run 2 tiles in a tick in any 8-way direction around your character. Notably, when you run, you teleport to your new position, skipping over most hazards that are in the tile that you skipped over. This is very important for making some encounters actually possible. Lastly, there are 3 combat styles in RuneScape: melee, ranged, and magic. There are further subdivisions here within each style, but they are not going to be important within this video. These styles are important both in terms of offense and defense. Most attacks from the player and enemies are one of these 3 styles. The player has access to protection prayers, which are special abilities that almost entirely negate the effects of one of these combat styles, excluding some chip damage. You can have exactly 1 protection prayer active on each given tick, and can freely switch between them on different ticks. You can think of prayer as weirdly religious mana in the context of other games, and using your protection prayers and other offensive prayers that boost your DPS drains your prayer points, which then can be replenished using potions. With only 28 inventory spots to play with, your inventories need to balance food, which helps you restore your HP, prayer restoration potions, which can help you restore your prayer, and also gear, which you can freely switch between at will throughout combat. Some encounters, such as raids, require all 3 combat styles, which means that bringing a gear switch for each combat style allows you to change clothes in the middle of the fight to deal with whatever comes your way. Now, let's get back to the Corrupted Gauntlet, the beginning of all my problems. For those of you who don't play RuneScape, the Corrupted Gauntlet is commonly referred to as the Red Prison by the game's community, due to its reputation for locking away Iron Men aiming to obtain the powerful Bow of Heredin, or the BOFA for short. The BOFA drops at a rate of 1 in 400 from the Corrupted Gauntlet, which takes the average iron about 8 to 10 minutes to complete. This means that assuming an average runtime of 9 minutes, it will take about 60 hours to go on drop rate for the bow. This doesn't even account for the fact that you can get unlucky, going multiple times over the drop rate. If this sounds ridiculous to you, this is just the type of game that RuneScape is. It's a grindy game by nature, with inconsistent reward schedules of getting drops to keep players on their toes, craving the next hit of dopamine. When I first tried the Corrupted Gauntlet, I was instantly hooked. The mechanics of the wolf/moose/dog guy Hunlith were unlike anything I'd encountered in a game before. At its core, high-level PvM in RuneScape is about juggling multiple balls at once. The amount of balls and the amount of care and attention that they require depends on the boss. Don't clip that. Why did I read this? This is an analogy I'll be returning to throughout the video to help explain the difficulty of each boss that we're going to be tackling. In the boss fight with Hunlith, you're tasked with hitting the boss with the correct attack style, which changes every 6 attacks, praying correctly against the boss's attacks, which changes every 4 attacks, not standing in the glowing lava tiles, which change periodically, and running away from a growing number of tornadoes, which spawn occasionally throughout the fight. As well, the boss periodically disables your prayer, sort of trying to catch you off guard a little bit. At the peak of its difficulty, which occurs during the Enrage phase near the end of the fight is hectic, controlled chaos, and it's one of the tightest design encounters in the game. I got incredibly lucky in the Corrupted Gauntlet, receiving my BOFA after only 8 completions. This was very fortunate, and also the beginning of the downfall of me being an Iron. You see, as an Iron Man account, I couldn't trade with other players or buy gear from the Grand Exchange, meaning I had to earn everything myself. Something that I didn't mention before is that to reach its full potential, the BOFA requires a full set of crystal armor, which boosts the bow's accuracy and damage when worn. The crystal armor is crafted out of crystal armor seeds, which drop at a rate of 1 in 50 from the Corrupted Gauntlet, and the full set of armor requires 6 seeds to create. This posed a bit of a dilemma for me. I love the Corrupted Gauntlet, but too much of anything is a bad thing in my opinion. After about 150 completions, I had gotten halfway to my armor seed goal, but I'd completely run out of steam for the gauntlet. The BOFA is such a good weapon that it unlocks many, many other bosses to fight after getting the required seeds. After getting a taste for PvM, I really, really wanted to see what other content the game had to offer. I wanted to go raiding in the Tombs of Amasket. I wanted to tackle Zulrah and the Phantom Muzpa, and most of all, I wanted to be free of the Red Prison, which got me hooked on PvM in the first place. To make a long story short, I decided to de-iron to continue my account, and to continue my progression, chasing that high I felt when I first stepped into the Corrupted Gauntlet. You can call me weak-willed for this decision, but then again, I do have blood Torva, so frick you. I'm just kidding. Fast forwarding to a few months later, I took on the Inferno, often touted as one of the game's hardest challenges. After snagging the world's least deserved Infernal Cape, as my friend Morgan, who watched me take both a Jad and Zuck hit, proclaimed, I felt probably the most accomplished I'd ever felt in my life. I spent hours and hours in the Inferno, most of which was spent failing in new and spectacular ways. Despite these failures, I never let silly deaths or heartbreaking failures get to me. I persevered because I knew it was possible, with just me, my BOFA, and a dream. This was in stark parallel to my work life at the time, where I was feeling about as demotivated as I've ever felt with research. I was stuck trying to finish a project that I didn't really care about, that seemingly would never work, that used techniques that were arcane to me at the time. Looking back, at this point RuneScape was definitely a problem in my life, but it's pretty easy to see that in retrospect. At the time, it was just an escape from feeling like an inadequate researcher and student, in comparison to my previous achievements. In RuneScape, it felt like I could do anything. And I would. The Colosseum, the spiritual successor to the Inferno, was quick to follow in the next month. With my trusty BOFA at my side and a whole lot of attempts, basically anything felt possible. After obtaining my Infernal Cape and Quiver, I quickly fell into a bit of a lull with the game. I had accomplished all that I thought was possible for me to do. Work was picking back up again with a new project, and I had less time to play. I continued to play off and on for the next few months, accruing a more expensive bank and items. I took on a new grind, the Soul Reaper Axe, with a time to complete that makes the BOFA blush at an estimated 160 hours. The axe drops in 4 pieces from 4 different bosses: Vardorvis, Duke Succulus, Leviathan, and Whisperer. With each piece being incredibly rare, you have to kill a whole lot of these guys to make the axe happen. However, as will be a running theme in this video, I was incredibly lucky, and I went a below drop rate for every single piece of the axe. Despite this, it was a massive undertaking, and probably the single biggest grind I've ever completed in the game. The axe is one of the strongest melee weapons in the game, and it's on a whole other level in terms of power in comparison to the bofa. With my new weapon in hand, I asked myself, what comes next? And the answer was Blood Torva. Blood Torva is the main topic of today's video. It took about 4 pages of script to start talking about it, which hopefully means that this is a good video. Fingers crossed. Blood Torva is a cosmetic override to Torva, the strongest melee armor set in the game. To receive this Ancient Sanguine Ornament kit, which allows you to create Blood Torva using both Torva and a whole lot of blood runes, you need to defeat 4 juiced up super bosses, which push the mechanics of the game to their limits. These super bosses are Vardorvis, Duke, Leviathan, and Whisperer, the 4 guys I just talked about. However, this time, they're not messing around. They're the Awakened versions. Every aspect of each boss fight is exaggerated and stretched to its limit. The amount of balls you need to juggle is often tripled. There are mechanics that are straight up puzzles that need to be solved, and your execution has to be perfect for each kill. In order to even challenge an Awakened boss, you need to use an Awakener's Orb, an item which is dropped rarely from each of the normal versions of the bosses. This Awakener's Orb is consumed when you challenge the boss, and at the time of me fighting the bosses was worth anywhere from about 700k to 1 million GP. This isn't a ton of GP in RuneScape terms, but it's not nothing, and especially for a poor main like me, it quickly became a problem. So the main points that we have to consider are that these bosses are incredibly difficult, and they have a cost to entry, barring anybody who isn't serious about taking them down from even trying, unless they waste their money. Our story begins in April, after I got the Soul Reaper axe. This axe is near best in slot for 2 of the 4 Awakened bosses, and so I decided I'd take on those 2 first. My logic was that I'd try out the other 2 bosses when I had enough GP to buy the gear that I needed to take them on. The first boss on our list is Awakened Vardorvis. Simply put, Vardorvis is a boss straight out of Bloodborne. He's an undead, headless vampire infected by a cursed plant fungus thing, and his surrounding area's theming is the closest thing to horror that exists in the game. Vardorvis is probably the second most challenging of the Awakened bosses. The power ranking of the bosses, in my opinion, looks like this. Leviathan is by far the hardest, with Vardorvis at a respectable position a little bit lower than it, with Duke and Whisperer at 3rd and 4th respectively. Something I really like about the Awakened bosses as a challenge is that they test different aspects of what makes RuneScape such an interesting game at a high level. The aspects that Vardorvis tests are your rhythm, reaction time, and abilities to do multiple things at once. You're often tasked with changing your prayers and moving on the same tick, which takes a lot of dexterity and click accuracy, and is something that very few bosses in the game require. In terms of duration, Vardorvis is a shortish fight, coming in at around 4 minutes with my gear and pace. There are 3 main balls to juggle at Vardorvis. The first, and most important, are these giant axes, which swing across the screen. If you're standing where an axe spawns, it'll hit you, and the axes can hit you for over a 90. Your HP normally maxes out at around 99, by the way. The second up are Vardorvis' melee attacks, which can hit up to a 61 if it catches you without your melee prayer on. So simple, just pray melee the whole fight and you're good, right? Well, the third thing we have to worry about is the prayer disabling head attack. Every now and again throughout the fight, Vardorvis' severed head pops up in the arena and shoots a projectile at you, which is either green or blue. If it's green, you have to pray range, and if it's blue, you pray mage. If this attack hits you, it disables your ability to pray defensively. You can't turn it back on until after Vardorvis' next melee attack, meaning you're guaranteed to be hit for around a 50 on average. Oh, and sometimes Vard becomes a figure skater and paints spikes on the ground which hit for a whole bunch of damage that you need to step away from, disrupting your dodging rhythm. And sometimes he makes you do a captcha, but this attack is pretty easy. So, dodge the axes, can't pray melee, and flick your prayers at the right time according to the head projectiles. This sounds pretty simple on paper, but the tricky bit is the speed of the encounter. The pace of the axes starts off pretty quick and quickly ramps up. The prayer attacks start off with just one head, and then 2 are launched at you simultaneously once the boss goes under 50% health. This requires you to flick your prayers tick perfectly for 3 ticks in the order of the projectiles firing at you. At 25% health, everything speeds up to a blistering pace, with almost no time to breathe. The prayer attacks become constant, and the axes are always on screen. Check out this clip to get an idea of how hectic things can get. Now, unfortunately, since I didn't know 4 months ago that I was going to be making this video, I don't actually have a clip of me killing Awakened Vardorvis. Sorry about that. In its place, take this clip of me getting extremely close to paint the picture. Overall, Awakened Vardorvis took me 14 deaths to complete, and marked an important milestone in my RuneScape journey. The Awakened bosses can bleed, and that means that it might actually be possible for me to beat them. Motivation is often something that is very challenging for me. As an undergraduate student, I spent the vast majority of my time working. I was either working on homework for classes, TAing to afford rent, or doing research in my spare time towards my goals of going to grad school. In those times, I found it quite easy to work, as it was simply the thing I had to do to continue succeeding. If I just kept swimming forward, I would eventually accomplish what I needed to. This changed when I got to grad school. Shortly before grad school, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which explained a lot about why I wasn't exactly the most normal person at all times. I would have large stretches of being unable to accomplish or do much of anything, followed by short, intense bursts of being able to check all the boxes on my to-do list with no problems. In these depressive times, RuneScape was always there for me, trickling dopamine into my starving brain with periodic drops and fun times with friends when they were around to jump into the Theater of Blood or the Chambers of Zera. In some sense, the game has kept me sane throughout this entire grad school process. With my newly awakened drive to kill the Awakened bosses, I set my sights on the next boss on the list, Awakened Duke Succulus. Duke is a very cute blob in a wall who was once a general or something for Zeros, I think. I'm not looking it up even for this video. Duke is the closest thing to a puzzle boss of the four, which requires both technical execution and a good plan in order to beat. Duke's main attack is a slam, which deals damage if you're standing directly next to him within a tick of him doing the attack. If you're not within one tile of Duke, he'll instead do a mage attack, which can hit up to a 71. You absolutely do not want to get hit by this attack, so you're going to be praying melee to reduce the tip damage from Duke's slam attack instead. So, got it. We have to be within one tile of Duke whenever he's starting to attack, and then we need to move away before he slams down and deals a ton of damage, even through pray melee. Every 5 attacks, Duke opens up his big old eye, and you need to hide behind one of the pillars in the room. If you don't hide in a timely manner, you just straight up die. Every now and then between slam attacks, Duke will shoot out 1 to 4 poison clouds, which create poison gas at your current position based on which vent on the floor you're closest to. You need to position yourself in a certain way in order to not rag the tiles you need to stand on during the fight. After shooting out the poison clouds, Duke has a chance to trigger an acid attack, which is where the puzzle aspect of the fight begins. When the acid attack hits you, you begin leaving acid behind every tile you walk on. The goal is to walk in such a way that you're not getting hit by Duke's attacks, not standing in the acid, which really adds up fast damage-wise, and not triggering the magic attack. Also, he can sometimes do the eye attack during this acid walk, making things incredibly hectic. In order to combat this, Red Eye Jedi devised a set of tiles that help guide you on where to step during the acid walk phase. All you have to do is execute perfectly when it actually happens. Finally, when Duke gets below a certain health threshold, he begins spawning these annoying orbs at random which move horizontally in front of Duke where you want to be standing. If you get hit by one, it can deal up to 27 damage and drains your stats, making it more difficult to kill the boss. So, list of things to juggle. Follow the acid walk pattern correctly, dodge the black orbs, perfectly stay in rhythm with Duke, and don't mess up hiding from the eye or the poison vent placements. Did I mention that he speeds up at around 25% health, changing the cycle that you do from 5 ticks to 4 ticks, and completely changing the rhythm of the entire fight? Duke took me about 8 deaths, but I definitely teleported out a few times in situations that were certain death. If I had to guesstimate, I think it took me roughly 15 attempts to get down, similar to Vardorvis. Also similar to Vardorvis, I don't actually have a clip of me getting the kill. The footage that you've been seeing now is B-roll that I've recorded after the fact with my fancy new gear. Don't worry though, I do have clips of the other two, so this isn't going to be the worst YouTube video of all time. The important bit here is doing the acid walk correctly, which you can see here. Basically all of the difficulty of the kill is doing this walk correctly while keeping your cool. Check it out! Now, at this point in our story, we've hit a bit of an impasse. There's a substantial gear wall between me and even attempting the next 2 Awakened bosses. While the Soul Reaper axe was great for Vardorvis and Duke, Leviathan and Whisperer are fought using the ranged and magic styles respectively. At this point in my account, I had accrued just enough GP to buy a Mega Rare if I sold nearly everything. Mega Rares are the strongest weapons in the game, and there's currently one for every combat style. These weapons are the Twisted Bow, the Tumeken's Shadow, and the Scythe of Vitur. The important thing to know about Mega Rares is that they cost a ridiculous amount of GP. Where the Bofa costs somewhere in the range of 100 million GP, the Twisted Bow costs about 1.5 billion GP. That's billion with a B. This presents a major hurdle for mains looking to upgrade their gear in the giga late game of RuneScape, and a problem for me. Which Mega Rare do I choose? After a lot of thought and deliberation, I chose the Scythe of Vitur? Now, this might not make much sense. If I already have one of the best melee weapons in the game in the Soul Reaper axe, and I've already finished the 2 Awakened bosses that require melee, why would I buy a Scythe if the Awakened bosses are my goal? Well, what can I say? I love the Theater of Blood, baby! There are a couple of reasons that I ended up going with the Scythe. One is the aforementioned Theater of Blood. At this time in my life, I was prepping a paper for a new research project I've been working on for the last 6 months. I didn't have a lot of time to play RuneScape, and when I did, I wanted to be playing with friends. The Theater of Blood is the best of the 3 raids in the game, and the Scythe is the best weapon there. I have had no better times playing this game than messing around in Tob with my friends. Another reason is that solo content with the Scythe just happens to be my favorite content in the game. The previously mentioned Colosseum becomes way more fun with the Scythe, for example. After beginning my Scythe rebuild, I completed 60 Colosseums to build back up my previous gear plus the Scythe. This resulted in a whole boatload of money, as well as a whole boatload of fun times. But the question still remains. How the heck am I going to kill the last 2 bosses, which require range and mage? Well, as I've said before, and I will say it again, I am incredibly lucky. In this case, I'm lucky to have amazing, very wealthy friends who are willing to lend me gear to help me achieve my goal. In particular, I have to thank Jade, the absolute goat who lent me her T-bow so I could fight the Awakened Leviathan. Of course, she didn't just lend it for nothing. I put up my Scythe, my pride and joy, as collateral. In order to make this happen, I needed to have reached the point to have a Mega Rare of my own. We've now reached the part of the video where we'll talk about the Awakened Leviathan. Leviathan is by far the hardest Awakened boss, and it's not even close. For those curious, I had previously tried Awakened Leviathan without the Twisted Bow, and after quite a few attempts, I deemed it not possible for my current skill level. I needed the T-bow in order to make this happen. Without mincing words, Leviathan is just fricked up. It requires over 6 minutes of very precise, stressful setup, where if you make one mistake, your entire run is over, followed by an enrage phase that is the hardest sustained combat encounter currently in the game. The Leviathan's basic attacks are relatively simple. It shoots a series of orbs at you, and you need to pray correctly based on the color of orb when it hits you. Red means melee, blue means mage, and green means range. When Leviathan finishes up a series of orbs, it shakes the ground and drops boulders which block up the arena where you're standing, as well as at a random place. We absolutely do not want this to happen, as the enrage becomes very difficult when there's just random boulders in your way, laying all over the place. Imagine trying to juggle 8 balls at once, and somebody has littered the ground with banana peels. It's kind of like that. So, lucky for us, we have the ability to stun the Leviathan using a shadow spell, which allows us to get a free single hit on the boss from behind. After this free hit, Leviathan will do one of 2 specials, alternating between the 2. If you let the boulder drop, you can tell which special is coming first using a helpful mnemonic. However, we don't need to do this. We can just react to which one comes first. The first special is the Shocking Test, where the Leviathan shoots out lightning that you need to dodge. You can dodge this by running back and forth in a certain pattern, hitting the boss on either end of your run. The second special is the Boulder Special, where Leviathan spits out a ton of boulders that gunk up the arena, then fires a big shockwave that you need to hide behind those boulders to avoid. The strategy here is to put the boulders in specific locations so that they don't get in our way later in the fight. In order to make sense of this setup phase, I needed a set of tiles that specifically guided me on what I had to do. I once again have Red-Eye Jedi to thank for this tile set, which I believe is likely responsible for a lot of the Awakened Leviathan kills in the game. At 50% HP, the Leviathan summons his Dastardly Tornado, which chases you around the arena similar to the tornadoes at Hunlith that I talked about earlier. If the tornado hits you, it deals about 40 damage and respawns in a nearby location a few ticks later. This tornado is my worst nightmare, and it makes the prep phase of the fight very stressful, as you need to keep moving at all times. At 20% HP, the Leviathan enters the Enrage phase. There's a lot going on in this phase, so I'll try to break it down step by step. The first thing that happens is that a lure will spawn in a designated quarter of the arena. You need to stay within the 7x7 area of this lure, or you will basically instantly die. Every tick, the Leviathan is going to shout, "Rah!" and fire an orb at you. You'll need to pray either range or mage depending on the color as before. There are falling boulders from the sky which can land on you, dealing a ton of damage and blocking your ability to hit the Leviathan, messing up your pathing. The tornado is still chasing you, by the way. This Enrage phase essentially throws 9 balls in the air and tells you to juggle perfectly for 30 seconds. If you miss around 2 or 3 prayers, you'll die. If you get hit by the tornado or a boulder, half your life is gone. You need to move, change prayers, dodge the boulders, and stay within the Pathfinder, all while hitting the boss. This is the hardest piece of content that is currently in the game, and I would be honestly surprised if they ever added anything this difficult again. In order to minimize the time you spend in the Enrage phase, the strategy is to proc it at a specific time, then rip a 6-way switch into Void and the Webweaver bow to use 2 special attacks to deal a ton of damage to the Leviathan right away. You then switch back to your T-bow and pray for good luck on the orb pattern you're given. The attack order is completely random, sometimes requiring you to change your prayers every tick, and sometimes giving you a small amount of leeway. This boss took me a lot of attempts in comparison to the other bosses. After about 30 attempts, many of which reached the Enrage phase, this happened. Big hit. So spooned. No! Wait, did I get it? Did that count? It didn't count. No! It, in fact, did not count. Killing the boss at the same time it kills you can sometimes work depending on when you die and when the boss dies, but this time I got a bit unlucky. The boulder spawn here dragged me into melee range of the boss, where he chomped me for big damage, instantly ending my run. But I wasn't discouraged by this crushing defeat. Instead, I tried again. And again. And again. And eventually, this happened. Come on. Thank you. Yes! Fuck yeah! Woo! 54 rune arrows, motherfucker! Chocolate bar div. Oh, alright, Jade, you want your TiVo back? Oh, thank you so much. I had done it. The hardest awakened boss completed. I was one boss away from claiming my blood Torva, but for now, it was time to take a break. And a break I took. I got my paper finished and submitted. I attended an amazing academic seminar in Germany. And when I got home, it was time for a new update to hit RuneScape, the Delve boss. I'm gonna be honest, I frickin' love this little guy. He's just a silly little bug, and he's one of the funnest fights they put in the game. And with a new boss comes new drops and new money to make. And as we previously established, I am incredibly lucky. Here comes the buddy! Buddy. With my newfound wealth, I decided to upgrade my mage setup and knock out the Awakened Whisperer. And to be honest with you all, this boss was kind of a victory lap. I'm not even going to take the time to explain her mechanics in this video. The important thing to know about this boss is that she's a stamina check. The fight took me well over 12 minutes to complete. If you can be consistent for that period of time, and you've got solid fundamentals and strategy going into the fight, she's really not that big of a challenge. As this footage of me fighting the boss plays, I just wanted to take a minute to talk about what this game means to me. This game has always been there for me during some of the hardest times in my life. Games have always been a coping mechanism for me in some sense, helping to distract me from whatever I might be dealing with at the time. Without RuneScape, I don't know if I'd still be in my PhD program, and I definitely don't know if I'd be sane. But more important than the game itself are the people in my life that surround it and make it such a compelling and interesting thing to play. There's Dewey and BMO, my top crew. There's Jade and the Common Fruits clan that I'm a part of. There's Nick and Chris and Morgan, my first friends who played the game with me. And of course, there's my lovely girlfriend Kat, who means the world to me and introduced me to this life-sucking game. I love you so, so much. And without all these people, RuneScape would be just a slot machine with a fancy coat of paint. I wholeheartedly thank you all for being a part of my life. And I thank anybody who's still watching this video after however long it's been since we started. With all of my trials so far weighing in the back of my mind, let's see how this enrage phase goes to close things out. Like really topped up? Alright, start on mage. Good luck me. Is that all you fucking got? Let's go! I fucking did it! Oh. And with that, Blood Torva was finally complete. All that there was left to do was just to make the helmet. After a quick drop party at the GE for my remaining Awakener's orbs, I was finally free of the curse of these bosses. So you might be wondering, what's next for me? Well, I'm gonna kill a whole lot of the Delve boss. I'm also gonna do some TOBs with friends. And most importantly, I think I'm gonna focus on advancing my career. I want to maintain a healthier relationship with the game than I have in the past. As well, my Oathplate armor is looking a little red. Maybe we can go for that Radiant Oathplate in the future? To close off this all too long video, I'm going to leave you with this. A common piece of advice about doing grad school is to not do it. If you feel like this is a challenge, or if you want to persevere despite this common advice, then grad school is likely for you. If it's something that you're driven to do, it's something that you should do. To that end, I leave you with the following. RuneScape is an amazing game, and you really, really shouldn't play it.